Call me out upon the water, 'cause next to you's where I belong. Your spirit fills me with your power. It is in you I am made strong. You are my only firm foundation, so I will stand on grace and truth. You said your love will last forever. Each day begins and ends with you. My foundation, my fortress, my rock and my shield, it's on you I'm standing. Well, the storm keeps raging, the waves keep crashing, but I will not be moved. I'm found in you, life shaking, the world keeps changing, but I will not be moved. I'm found in you. Come on. You said my faith could move a mountain if I only just believe. Your voice fills me like a fountain, and it's your voice that carries me. My foundation, my fortress, my rock and my shield, it's on you I'm standing. Well, the storm keeps raging, the waves keep crashing, but I will not be moved. I'm found in you, life shaking, the world keeps changing, but I will not be moved. I'm found in you. Yeah. I'm found in you. Come on, see where you're at. Well, the storm keeps raging, the waves keep crashing, but I will not be moved. I'm found in you, life shaking, the world keeps changing, but I will not be moved. I'm found in you, storms raging, the waves keep crashing, but I will not be moved. I'm found in you, life shaking, the world keeps changing, but I will not be moved. I'm found in you. Oh yeah, I'm found in you. Found in you. Come on.
We're going to talk about this tonight. Clay and I, we wrote a message. It's honestly on getting shipwrecked. We're going to look at a story in Acts 27. You're not supposed to pick favorites, or I'm not sure, but in Acts, this is my favorite story in Acts. It's a story about shipwrecks. Paul getting shipwrecked. It's his 4th shipwreck. 4. So I believe this, and I think this is true. In your life, you're going to have some storms, aren't you? Okay, not every storm leads to a shipwreck. You just have some storms, like that was kind of tough. So there are moments in our life where it feels like we got stuck, we were abandoned, no one was there, our legs were cut out. Have you experienced that? Okay, so if you haven't lived enough life, I think you'll have a couple of them in your life, won't you? A business partner betrays you. A company goes under. It's like facing financial failure. A family member gets sick. I mean, there's just these moments, aren't there? And I think our culture, Clay and I were talking about this, our culture likes a good shipwreck story. So Castaway is a shipwreck story with an airplane. The Martian is a shipwreck story in outer space. There was a shipwreck movie that did pretty good. Some of you weren't born yet, but I looked, I did the math to see inflation, and it made over $1 billion in today's currency. And it was not lost in space, but that is a good film. It's underappreciated. It's a little movie, and do you guys know the movie I'm thinking of? It came out in 1997. Titanic. Which, to be fair, they could have both fit on that door, couldn't they? The weight would have distributed. Okay. We like a shipwreck story. Here's why. We can identify with moments where it feels like we got left alone. And so we're going to look at Acts 27 tonight. If you have notes, you can pull those out. We're going to pull the Bible, open it up. And on the back of your card before you leave, we're going to save that because I want you to write a note to yourself. But Clay, I guess the first question I wrote down for you is just when you were reading this week, what started, you read Acts 27, what started to kind of ruminate with you?
Yeah, the main thing, so we'll get into it and we'll read it and we'll see, but there's a moment before they shipwreck, like he was saying, where they're in a storm, and we started looking into the storm and okay, well, what causes that? How is there a way to avoid it? And the definition that came up was two contrary winds colliding and creating a swirl. So it sounds like, and then you start to put that into your mind of situations that maybe you've been in. Honestly, it could be a Thanksgiving table with family members where there's contrary winds. Yeah.
Anybody experienced contrary winds at a family meal recently?
And you end up in a swirl. It could have been in your group right there. That could have been a swirl. I don't know.
Yeah.
But have you guys felt that before? That swirl of the winds, they come, and so just like that, keeping that picture in my mind, when you're in that swirl, it's hard to pay attention to anything else. And we'll even see in the scripture, it talks about how the sky and the stars were all blotted out by darkness and by clouds and the wind. And that's back in that time, that's what they used to navigate. That's how they knew where they were going. And so it completely just took them off course. There was nothing that they could see to know if they were on the right path.
Acts 27:22, by the way, just says this. I want to circle this in the Bible, and then we're going to work through it. And it says, take courage, none of you will lose your lives, even though the ship will go down. Let's just start with that. Take courage, none of you will... That does read differently than I want it to, right? When God says that to me.
Yeah.
I would like it to say, take courage, the ship is going to be fine. Take courage, the ship's going to go down. So I guess, Clay, as we kind of start to break kind of this ice of just okay, are there times that's happened in my life? Was there a time for you that you thought of where you felt like you've been shipwrecked?
I was trying to think about that swirl, a moment where I'm I don't know what's going to happen. And I started thinking back yesterday when we were talking on the phone. So my family, my wife and I, we have 2 kids. Last year, we decided to go on a road trip. And we have a 1990 Volkswagen Vanagon. It's an old bus. You can camp in it. It's a good vibe. It's very cool. What they don't tell you is you're not supposed to take, 30-year-old cars on road trips unless you're planning on restoring them completely.
Sure.
So I did as much as I could in preparation.
Which was?
A lot. I ordered parts. I replaced parts. I learned
more than
a lot.
I would have done. I would have been I washed it. I don't know.
It was running. It was running. And it was running pretty good. And I felt pretty confident. And so we were let's split up the first day. We're trying to make it to Montana. So we split up the first day. We get to Coeur d'Alene.
That's a pretty long drive.
It's 14 hours. So we get to Coeur d'Alene. We're cruising, 55 and an 85. No worries. Music's cranking. We get to our Airbnb and we're all smiles. We ordered food. It's waiting for us in the house. Get out. Shut the door. Just smoke.
Out of the van.
It happened in the perfect place because we had just pulled into the parking lot. But
if I'm getting shipwrecked, that at an Airbnb with food, that sounds
pretty good. Yeah, that's true.
So
I guess
far,
maybe
this is great.
Story. But so I start freaking out because I'm okay, we have a 9-month-old.
Yeah.
We have a 3-year-old.
Yeah.
And then my wife. And I promised them that this was going to be a great family vacation and that I did enough things to the car that nothing was going to go wrong. And they shouldn't have believed me. And so I'm start panicking. And I don't have many times in my life where I've been panicking. And so they're inside, they're eating. I'm not eating. I can't sleep. I go out and lay in the gravel in the dark for an hour trying to find what's wrong. I'm not going to see anything. I'm in the swirl. I am fully in the swirl. I cannot see any sort of thing that would be an issue. And so I was okay, I felt the need that I had to make it okay. I had to have control of the situation. And I finally was like, okay, I need to let go of control. I'm sure there's someone here who can fix it. So I start calling around. Nobody wants to work on this car. It's an old car. It's a foreign car. Finally, have you ever looked up somewhere on Google Maps and you get this place that has like one review from 2012, no photos, it's like Ken's Auto LLC or whatever.
And the review is, it's Ken's Auto and the review is from Ken.
Yeah, and he's like, I'm really good.
He's like, I love this place, I work here.
So I called him, I left him a message. He calls me back in the morning and he's like, yeah, come on down, whatever. So I go find his place. It's his house. He comes out, 7 a.m., big gulp in hand. He's not a coffee guy. He's like a Mountain Dew Code Red guy.
Which no one's here to judge. If that's you and you're here, you belong here.
It's fine. Go move to Coeur d'Alene. Your people are there. And he comes out and we take a moment to look. There's a hose, tiny little hose, that is 30 years old. I didn't replace it. It got really brittle over time and it cracked and it caused a huge problem. And I thought I was so prepared. I thought that I had everything that I needed. And I didn't account for sometimes there's these little things along the way that stick with you. You think that it's not a big deal, but then in that swirl, in that storm, after you put a lot of pressure on it, it starts to crack. And literally he grabbed it and goes, I think this is the problem, and it broke off in his hand.
Wow. And
he went into in his shop, in his garage, in his home, and got another little piece of hose and put it on. And I was like, I'm surrendering control to Ken's Auto LLC. My life is in your hands.
And I'm going to put a review, because this has been a wonderful experience.
And then I'm like, okay, how much is this going to cost? He's like, oh, whatever you want to pay me. And so I handed him $20 cash, and he was like, that's more than I would ask for. He's like, I'm going to take my wife out to dinner. And I was like, you saved my vacation. Sweet. So if you're in Coeur d'Alene, look up Ken.
Yeah.
But so we ended up getting where we were going. Everything went great, but we went a completely different way than we had expected. And I had to let some things go on the way. And that was the first story that came to mind when we were reading through this. And I'm like picturing that swirl where you're like, I don't know what to do.
And by the way, don't you love, like, did you already hear the way, I love the way Clay said it. One of the things that we do when we get stuck in the swirl is we raise our hand and ask for help. Isn't the church the place that should be the kind of place where the connection feels like you can raise your hand and ask for help? We care about, it's like, you're like, I think I'm cared for. Okay, let's do a little Bible study. Acts 27, let's open it up. I want to look at it. So Paul, just for context, honestly, if you're like, you want to get really into history, I could do a lot longer, but for just right here on Thursday night, for the last 2 years, there's a group of religious leaders that have been trying to kill Paul. They've been working a lot of different angles. Now, Paul, you got to realize, he was persecuting Christians. That's his story. Jesus, in a moment of total transformation, turned his heart, 180 degrees, how many degrees you want, and just said, like, you are actually going to start spreading the gospel. So Paul's pretty smart. You got to think, like, these religious leaders are trying to get him kind of caught, and he's, like, a little bit uncatchable. And he really keeps saying, I want to take my case up to Caesar, which would be like going up to the Supreme Court. And there's really no case against him. He's like preaching the resurrected Lord. Rome's kind of like, we don't really care. They're like, well, we really care, and we don't want him to. So this kind of goes on for a number of years. There's some different leaders that kind of take over and come back in. And all that to say, Paul appeals to the court of Caesar, and they say, great, we're going to send you. Paul is going to, honestly, a destination that I think was on Paul's heart from the very beginning. I mean, you got to picture this. The gospel, Jesus said that the gospel would go to the ends of the earth. Rome is the superpower. If you wanted to see the gospel spread that far, man, if you could convert Caesar, that'd be pretty good. This is in Paul's soul. He gets on a boat. It actually starts and it says this. If you look in your Bible, it says, we left on a ship. Now, have you noticed this since we've been going through Acts? It's only used we a couple of times. Most of the time, it's he or they or she. So we, why is there multiple people here now? Okay, so Luke, the author of Acts, is back with Paul. They've gone on, actually, 3 different times. They've gone on missionary journeys together. Luke and Paul are together. So when we look at this story of shipwreck, the author Luke is right there. And we notice this, that it says, okay, Acts 27, verse 5. Keeping to the open sea, we passed along the coast of Sicilia to Pamphylia, landing at Myra in the province of Lycia. There, the commanding officer found an Egyptian ship from Alexandria that was bound for Italy and put us aboard. So this ship, I just want you to picture this. It's a massive ship. Egypt is the breadbasket to the world. A lot of food coming out of Egypt. So you're picturing a ship that's carrying, honestly, millions of dollars of cargo. You also have universities in Rome. So there would have been college students. You also have people traveling. It's like there's been families would have been on this boat. You have over 200 people, and it's a massively diverse group. Okay, so let's keep going. It says, in verse 8, we struggled along the coast with great difficulty and finally arrived at Fair Havens near the town of Lasea. We had lost a lot of time. The weather was becoming dangerous for sea travel because it was so late in the fall, and Paul spoke to the ship's officer about it. So as this kind of Fair Havens would have done this, it would have been a natural protection from a small storm, but in the winter months, they just lost too much time and they get pushed up against the ground. You ever felt like in your life you're kind of running against the clock? You just ever felt that, like that pressure that just starts to build? And it's interesting here, you notice what happened. Paul did speak up. Which there's people who would make different cases. I could make a strong case that we're going to see the strongest. I love Paul. I love his resiliency, his grit, his ability to see all people in all places. We're going to look at some of the strongest leadership inside of Paul in this story. He's a prisoner, not usually the person you listen to in a time of crisis. Yeah, it's like his voice. So he does say, he's like, hey, just like heads up, I do want to, and you see they listen to the ship's captain, which won't be the case in a couple more verses. So let's pop in, verse 10 says this, I believe there is trouble ahead if we go on, shipwreck, loss of cargo, and danger to our lives as well. But the officer in charge of the prisoners listened more to the ship's captain and the owner than Paul. So nobody listens, and then in verse 13 it says this, when a light wind began blowing from the south, the sailors thought they could make it. So they pulled up the anchors and sailed close to the shore of Crete. But the weather changed abruptly, and a wind of typhoon strength called the northeastern burst across the island and blew us out to sea. The sailors couldn't turn the ship into the wind, so they gave up and let it run before the gale. Clay said this, but a northeastern is two contradicting winds coming together with a massive amount of pressure. You notice that in some of the most challenging seasons of your life. A lot of pressure, multiple things colliding together, creating that storm. Verse 18 says this, the next day, as gale force winds continued to batter the ship, the crew began throwing the cargo overboard. Now pause for just a second. We're not talking about like your Patagonia bag and some like a lunch. This is millions of dollars. Someone's boss was incredibly unhappy or would be incredibly. It's like you're picturing a cargo ship and now they're dumping containers off of it. A pretty big deal. So cargo's overboard. The following day, they even took some of the ship's gear and threw it overboard. Okay, so now these are resources, while helpful, aren't the most necessary because they need to stay light. Have you ever had a moment in your life where you just felt like God started to ask you to let go of things because of the pressure? Let's stay with that for a second. The terrible storm raged for many days, blotting out the sun and stars until at last all hope was gone. Clay already referenced this, but if this is a movie, this is where the screen on the airplane starts to go out. Does it make sense? This is their navigation. This isn't poetry. It sounds like poetry, stars. There you go. This is the only navigation they have is looking up at the sky. Have you ever had a moment in your life where it felt like the course you had inside, the plan you had inside of you, your navigational tool went out and you were just kind of spinning? Maybe you're in that season right now. I'll just say this. It would be hard not for all of us on some level to say the last 2 years hasn't been that season. But, right? It's like I haven't met with anybody yet who's like, no, I did pretty good the last couple of years. Like nothing really changed. I haven't met, if you're here, like wonderful. I'd love to hear about the bunker you live in. Like, I don't know. Like, yeah, it's called Alabama. It didn't happen down there. Verse 21. Paul called the crew together and said, men, you should have listened to me. I love that. Paul just throws in a little, I told you so. Paul, good to me. You should have listened to me in the first place and not left for Crete. You would have avoided all this damage and loss. But take courage. None of you will lose your lives, even though the ship will go down. I mean, I just, maybe take a second. I don't want to hear it that way. But do you think there's things in our lives, in our community, in our American church that maybe aren't serving the mission, but have just kind of served us? And Jesus says, it's okay that this ends so something new can start. I titled this message, How to Survive a Shipwreck. I actually think a better title would be this, how to use a shipwreck to go on mission. None of you will lose your lives ever, even though the ship will go down. For last night, an angel of God to whom I belong and whom I serve stood beside me and said, don't be afraid, Paul, for you will surely stand before Caesar. What's more, God in his goodness has granted safety to everyone sailing with you. So take courage. For I believe God. It will be just as he said, but we will be shipwrecked on an island. I had never noticed this in the story. I was reading this, I sent this to Clay. You look at this, scholars actually call this moment with Paul a reverse Jonah. Think back in your, maybe some of you guys, you remember the story, Jonah? He's abandoning God. He's disobeying God. And his disobeying does what? It puts the ship and the people on the ship in danger. Remember that story? What's happening here? Paul is obeying God, and he's taking really the people in the ship and providing them with safety. You know, as we look at this story, you see after that, basically what happens, they tie the whole of the ship together, they throw everything overboard, and then really they just kind of jettison for the shore. And the story ends with really like all these people, they're like getting on, it makes it sound like scraps of the boat, they're getting ashore, and all the people are there safe. Interesting, it doesn't count how many dollars were lost. Doesn't count how much time was wasted. Counts how many people were saved. I just wonder, you think about church. It's like how we've been doing church. Is it okay? Maybe our model changes a little bit after COVID. Maybe this is a new model. Maybe some of the things we were counting don't matter as much as we thought they did. But maybe it's the people that are in this room. So that's just that's Bible. We just went through Acts 27. And again, one sneaky little thing in here that's like this. You'd have to do some digging just because I love the story. They land in Malta, kind of this little island community. There's a famous cathedral in Malta. Pretty big saint came out of that cathedral. And you might actually, you don't think you know a lot of saints. I think you know this one. His name was Saint Nicholas. So there's a case that if Paul didn't get shipwrecked here,
no Christmas.
We might not have Christmas the way we currently do. Okay, so Clay, that's Acts 27. I love this question for you is, what do we do? How do we survive a shipwreck? Like when you read this, I'm curious for you, like how do you piece it together and then give it to us in a way that's like, okay, I can go into my Friday and be like, that's how I'll address the shipwreck in my life.
I think like the main thing that stood out to me was the thing that's so counterintuitive was the fact that they start getting rid of all their stuff. Because you would think that their stuff is the thing that's like so precious to them. Because they start with the cargo, obviously. Like you said, they're losing all this money. These are things that they were like, they're forfeiting income, maybe their jobs. And then they start getting rid of their gear, which was the stuff that when they packed, they said, okay, we're gonna need this. It may have even been stuff that they thought was gonna help them survive the storms. And it was kind of like God's moment of being like, you don't need any of that. I got you. Like let go of that stuff because I'm going to carry you through. And then at one point, people start trying to escape on the lifeboats. And Paul's like, we got to stick together. He's like, if we don't all stay on this boat, then we are not going to survive. And so he was like, we need everyone to come together in this moment. And so he starts getting rid of the lifeboats. They cut them off and let them away to sea. And I just started thinking about like, what are our lifeboats? Like the things that we have them because they're security. It's our security blanket. It might be a relationship, a habit. There's a million things that it could be that we think, well, just in case something goes wrong, I can always go back to this. It's your plan B. And God's like, you don't need a plan B. The ship might crash. The ship might go away, but you don't need to worry about it. I got you. You're not going to die.
That's good. That's so good. and thinking through, some of the stuff we cut, because it really, what is it? It's the cargo, then it's the like resources, then the lifeboats.
The last thing is the anchor, which an anchor holds you in one place. An anchor or slows you down in a storm. Yeah. And when they lifted up the anchor, you saw that they got taken out to sea. And then they tried to drop the anchor to not crash into the cliffside. And then they end up cutting the anchor. That's the last thing that they get rid of. And I started thinking about like the things in our life that pull us down, that slow us down. So they almost like, by the end, once they're like feeling confident and they're trusting, they cut the anchor. It's like, we're going full force ahead. I don't know where I'm going. I don't recognize the coastline, but I believe that it's going to be okay.
Are there things in our life that's like we think are anchoring us and we actually have to cut it? That's so interesting. Are there lifeboats in our lives that maybe you've just started following Jesus and you've kind of kept a lifeboat? Maybe in your business, you're like, well, I just have this. In our relationships, do we do that? What would you need to cut? What lifeboat? What would you need to jettison to be the lightest so that Jesus could use you? That's so good.
Yeah. There's a moment right before they cut the anchors when they wake up, I think on the 14th day, which I think is a significant number because that's the amount of time that you can go without water.
It's 14 days?
It's 14 days.
I didn't know that.
And so on the 14th day, Paul gets up and he's like, hey guys, you've been so worried. You have not eaten. You haven't been taking care of yourselves. And we started like thinking about if you've ever been in a shipwreck situation in your life, or maybe just a moment where you're in that swirl. And like the first thing to go is like that self-care. Like you might not eat, you might not take care of yourself, you might stop going to the gym, you might like whatever it is for you that feels like you're taking care of yourself and being the best you can be, it starts to go out the window when you're in a shipwreck moment. And Paul's like, hey, we got to break bread. We got to eat. If we don't strengthen ourselves up, then we're not going to survive this. And there's actually this moment that is actually, so there's a really practical, like human thing that they do, which is just eat bread and their bellies are full. But then there's this like almost like communion moment that they have. Because it says when Paul broke the bread and ate it, that they were all encouraged and they were ready to move forward. And so you picture like us as a community breaking bread together, going to the source, strengthening ourselves so that we can go through anything as a team with God on our side, because we keep going back to the source. And hopefully, it sticks with us in our hearts. We don't wait 14 days.
Well, does anybody in here, did anybody else forget to eat lunch sometimes? I think I would be in that group of 14. I'd be like, oh man, we've been doing this shipwreck thing. I should probably eat.
Yeah. And so he had to remind them, but I just think that's like, you gotta, in those shipwreck moments, you gotta take care of yourself. Like you gotta take care of those things that are gonna keep you afloat.
So I think the first thing I heard you say was there's stuff that we cut or let go of.
You got to get rid of, there's stuff you got to get rid of.
And then you're saying second thing is like you have to be able to take care of yourself, take care of others. It's really probably the airplane model, right? Like where do you put the oxygen on yourself before you put it on the person next to you. So probably what Paul shows here, I think in his leadership, is he's like, and by the way, did you notice this? Eating together here during crisis does something to their souls, doesn't it? It's no coincidence that eating together on a Thursday night, it's something for our souls, isn't it? That's part of the model. Okay, so then what else?
So then the last thing, so they've lightened themselves up. They're able to, navigate the waves better. Yeah. They've cut the anchors. They're full force ahead. They've eaten. They've strengthened themselves. But they might not know where they're going. They might not know to trust God yet. But Paul took a moment in the storm to listen. He took a moment in the swirl. You couldn't see anything. He couldn't see the stars. There was no navigation. But he listened, and we see, what was the verse? Will you read that again where the angel is?
Yeah, it says, for last night, an angel of God to whom I belong, that one. Mm-hmm. Okay. For whom I belong and whom I serve stood beside me. And he said, don't be afraid, Paul, for you will surely stand trial before Caesar. What's more, God in his goodness has granted safety to everyone sailing with you.
That's good. So take courage. We will be shipwrecked on an island, but you won't lose your lives. And so God had that message for him. It's almost like he's like, hey, this is where we're headed. You don't have to worry. You can trust me. But a lot of times we forget to listen. We let the other voices kind of take over, or we let the wind get too loud in our lives, and we don't take time to notice even that there was an angel literally standing right beside him. But if he was so focused on other things or like preserving the cargo or whatever it may be, he may not have taken the moment to notice that. And then that's his moment to lead as a prisoner. So before he said, hey, don't go, there's going to be a storm, they didn't listen. Yeah. And then he came and he said, hey, an angel spoke to me, we're going to be okay. And they listened. because he took a moment to listen, and the message that he was carrying was important for everybody. It was super powerful. So I feel like, there's stuff we got to get rid of. There's things that we have to do to care for ourselves. And then we have to take time, even in the storm, to listen for the voice of God and where he's leading us and what he's calling us to let go of, what he is calling us to do to strengthen ourselves.
I wrote it down this way. I don't know if this helps you. If you're like a note taker, this might be something to hold on to this week, is to get where God is leading you, you have to let some things go. You might write that down. Have you found that to be true? To get to where God is leading you, you'll have to let some things go. Some of that is pride or ego. By the way, can we just say this? There are good, so they didn't let go of the people, and there are good things in your life. I mean, it would be a shame to let go of responsibilities that God's given you, and you're like, I just don't go to work anymore. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like, there are things that God's given you that he's entrusted you with. But there is, let's just call it extra things that God will start to show and just say, like, this is, one of the practices of just like following Jesus is honestly saying, I need to live on less so that I can give more generously. I mean, this room, we just say, hey, it's going to cost this much to pay for this. And this room's just like, we're going to pay for it because we think this matters. That is the activation of the Holy Spirit. And so just, I wonder, Clay, I guess my question for you, I didn't know, like, as you process this, and if you're new to Thursday night, one of the things we practice is modeling conversation. Have you seen this? And aren't we thankful for leaders like Clay? I mean, Clay leads our creative team. He leads our communication team. We're modeling conversation. We're practicing conversation because we think the world needs more of it. So the question I wrote down is just, is there something in your life or an area of your life you're like, I think this is where I'm letting go, or I'm starting to ask God, like, is this something I need to let go of?
Yeah. I talked about it a little bit earlier. Well, also, I think one thing that we didn't mention is they didn't shipwreck in Rome. They didn't shipwreck in their destination. So they're getting to a place that is unknown. They don't even know how they're going to get to the next place. But it's that thing that you spoke of like the church model. Like, the ship that got them to where they're going isn't going to take them to the place that they actually want to go. Yeah. So they almost needed like a reset moment. And so I feel like in my life and in the work that I do, it's been years of me doing it the same way, where it's like I have to have my hands on everything. And I want the control because I want it to turn out the way that I want it to turn out. And God has just been placing people in my life that are like, hey, I can do it, and probably better. Yeah. And I'm starting to realize, like, okay, if I want to get to this next place, and if we want to reach more people with the gospel and like all of these things that are our goals, that are our Rome that's on the horizon, there's things that I need to let go of. And for me right now, that is like control in lots of areas, in the things that I make, but also just in my life, trying to be less like, I mean, you guys heard it in the story. Like, I was like losing my mind trying to fix this car, but I was like, I just had to surrender it for a moment. The other day we were on vacation, and we were like running late for something, because of course we had something scheduled on vacation.
You were in the van?
No, we weren't in the van. We took our normal car.
Like, it's good now, but we don't want to push it. Yeah.
And my wife was like, hey, it's for whatever. Are you worried about? And I was like, no. And she was like, okay. And I was like, we're here. Whatever happens, happens. I'm just going to go with the flow. And she had that moment of like, who are you and what did you do with my husband? And so I'm like trying to find little ways.
Because my wife's like, can you go with the flow like a little
she's
less?
Like, it's 4:30.
Like, pull that back a little bit more.
Yeah. So maybe we need to get together and kind of like model,
Yeah. That's why this is good. You're watching, this is good for us.
Yeah. But so, yeah, for me, it's control. I'm trying to let go in every area to where, God's saying, like, trust me, I got it. I'm going to put people in your life that are going to take care of it. You don't need to take care of everything.
Does anybody else, you feel that control? Yeah. I mean, they bound the hull of the ship. I just wonder, was there a season in the church where pastors were bounding the hull of a ship that Jesus is like, that's not the future?
Yeah.
Hear this, there's going to be something you're letting go of. And you might even start to take a moment now just to ask God, what is it? There's also, going back to the start of the story, and we're going to have a moment here to reflect together and have a moment of worship. Jesus put, I think, Rome and going to Caesar on Paul's soul. Paul, he is like, he knows the destination that God's called him to. For so many of us, it's felt like we've lost the navigation, we've been floating around in the storm, and maybe we've lost a little of the sense of the mission that God put in us. In us. And you need to hear tonight, you're not too young, you're not too old. You're not disqualified, you're not unseen. God sees you. He knows the calling he's put in you. There may have been distractions or hurt or complexities that were beyond your control. And those storms and those shipwrecks are leading to a great work. And Paul had a moment on that beach. And I believe he knew that Jesus was leading him.
You are not hidden. There's never been a moment you were forgotten. You are not hopeless. For you have been broken, your innocence stolen. I hear you whisper underneath your breath. I hear your SOS, your SOS. I will send out an army to find you in the middle of the darkest night. It's true, I will rescue you. There is no distance cannot be covered over and over. You're not defenseless. I'll be your shelter, I'll be your armor. I hear you whisper underneath your breath. I hear your SOS, your SOS. I will send out an army to find you in the middle of the darkest night. It's true, I will rescue you. I will never stop marching to reach you in the middle of the hardest fight. It's true, I will rescue you. I hear the whisper underneath your breath. I hear you whisper you have nothing